What's up, guys? I'm telling you, it's going down. Look at the airspace over Camp David, complete and total lockdown. This is, of course, the presidential retreat, a naval and marine base out in the middle of nowhere, Maryland. And this is the first time that President Trump has used Camp David for a full weekend in his second term. You can see here the Marines and the midshipmen standing at attention as President Trump arrives at the rustic Camp David that is extremely isolated and impossible to spy on. And of course, on total and complete military lockdown, Trump has been silent all weekend. He's been there with, and now we know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and Raisin Kane, General Dan Kane, who's the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Something big is going down. We think we know what's happening because, well, we know the history of Camp David. It's officially known as a naval support facility, Thermont. This is a secure country retreat. Apparently, it's impossible to spy on it. It has no modern electronics. The facility is an active naval base staffed with Navy and Marine personnel who provide the security, but also provide the establishment capacity for the land invasion of Cuba. This is my guess. This is Marco Rubio a week ago standing in front of the Cuban map. And this is a Cuban land map showing all the infrastructure of Cuba, which there's very little. It's all collapsing. And Cuba has just made a remarkable change just this week, actually just within hours. I believe personally that they are negotiating with Cuban leadership for the end of the communist regime. I'm just going to jump right out and say it. This is President Trump. He's choosing not to spend Father's Day where he normally would on one of his golf courses or one of his properties in Florida. Instead, he's going to a place that he hates. He doesn't like Camp David. He's talked trash on Camp David. Presidential retreat, 70 miles north of D.C. It's quiet and tranquil. No, it's a place where you can't get spied on. Cuba is, of course, a operational base for Russia and China for intelligence gathering. And President Trump is vague posting. He just posted this one time. I think it's very interesting. He posted this photo. This is a photo of a woman at Camp David. Nobody's quite sure who this woman is. She's at Camp David because these are the Camp David couches and the decor. People have matched it, but nobody knows who she is. Great daughter, my honor, President DJT. So who is that? Who is this? This is the one little clue we have as to what's going on. This is a relative of Dwight Eisenhower. People are almost absolutely sure that this is Andrea, Tricia Nixon. President Trump posted a photo of the woman and said, my great daughter, my honor. Everyone was confused what it meant because it's not his daughters in the photo, but it's obviously somebody in the presidential, chain because she's hanging out at Camp David, the president's private retreat. Pretty sure it's Tricia Nixon at Camp David. Julie remarried David Eisenhower. Nixon and Eisenhower were critical in the Cold War, in the fight against communist Cuba and in the fight to eventually, put at bay the Cuban Missile Crisis and the crisis in Cuba. I think that's what Trump is signaling here. Trump posted this picture. He's currently at Camp David. You can see here, it's the same couches. It's the same patterns on, this is from the George Bush era. God help us. Neocon gathering. But you can see here, same couches, same patterns. So Trump's posting relatives of Eisenhower and Nixon, critical Cold War warriors, probably the greatest Cold War warriors, frankly, until they killed Kennedy. President Trump is going to Camp David this weekend, very quiet weekend. You never see Trump do stuff like this. At the same time, J.D. Vance isn't there. J.D. Vance has arrived in Switzerland for peace talks with the Iranians. This is him clapping back
right now, Vice President.
So this is quite interesting. So J.D. Vance isn't in the picture. So Rubio's there and J.D. Vance isn't in the picture. When have I seen this before? The Maduro raid, the invasion of, the bombing of Iran. These I'm not saying that J.D. Vance has been cut out or anything like that. I'm saying that Trump has particular staffing requirements for certain decisions. J.D. Vance is off negotiating the peace. Trump is negotiating the war. I think that's what's happening. At the exact same time, Cuba has approved 176 free market measures. This happened hours ago. So Cuba's parliament fundamentally transformed the nation most likely, and this is my professional take, that they are negotiating with President Trump to do this. The biggest and broadest overhaul of the island's communist economy since the revolution, a free market win. Viva Cuba. Cuba's Communist Party approves emergency economic plan to open to private enterprise. A reminder that the Castros are under DOJ indictment, that Donald Trump has sent the CIA to Cuba to effectively negotiate to say, we're going to storm into your island and seize the Castro brother to prove that you have no more legitimacy. If they are able to arrest and throw a Castro in prison, I think that's what's going on. What signal would that send to the Cuban people? That the Castros have no power. The Communist Party has no power. Cuba's Communist Party approves sweeping free market reforms, an unprecedented move to open the economy. Trump has the Western Hemisphere on chokehold. That's what he's doing at Camp David. Trump's about to change the world again. You guys are getting a load of this. 1,000%. This is Trump getting Cuba to come around. Communism is collapsing in Cuba as we speak. Total free market victory. Cuban legislators unanimously approved sweeping reforms backed by the Communist Party. Former leader Raul Castro, the guy who's supposed to be black-bagged in the dark of night like Maduro. It would privatize vast swaths of the country's socialist economy. Cuba's leadership signed off. And I hate to pour cold water on this, but nothing will happen unless there's regime change in Cuba. I mean, I think a lot of people agree with that. They'll just flip it back as soon as Trump's out of office. So that's what I think they're doing at Camp David. I think Trump's about to change the Western Hemisphere forever. The fall of communist Cuba soon. Marco Rubio, spitting facts. If you want to know like where the administration's head is, well, go ahead and listen to these two answers from Marco Rubio saying, yeah, I'll tell you, when and where we invade Cuba. And I'm not going to tell you a second ahead of time. And while we'd like to negotiate a diplomatic settlement, this is one that's critical. We'd like to negotiate a diplomatic settlement. This is a threat to our national security. And the president has a right and an obligation to address that threat. And that is what's going on at Camp David this weekend. Cuba not only has weapons they acquired from China and Russia, but they host China and Russian intelligence. It's posed a national security threat. They're the leading state sponsor of terror. Where have I heard this before? Ladies and gentlemen, here's Marco explaining what's about to happen. You heard it here first. You heard it here first.
I can tell you, Cuba not only has weapons that they've acquired from Russia and China over the years, but they also host Russia and Chinese intelligence presence in their country, not far from where we're standing right now. So Cuba has always posed a national security threat to the United States. They, by the way, have been one of the leading sponsors of terrorism in the entire region. You look at the groups that work out of Colombia that have destabilized that country over the years, with full support from this regime over there. So Cuba's consistently posed a threat to the national security of the United States. And the other thing that poses a threat to the national security of the United States is to have a failed state 90 miles from our shores run by friends of our adversaries. Our preference in Cuba and anywhere in the world is a negotiated diplomatic settlement, okay? And that's what I would say to you. The president always has the option to do whatever it takes to support and protect the national interest and national security of the United States. He has the option to do that if there's a threat to the national security of the United States. And he has shown his willingness to do that when he identifies such a threat. That said, our preference is always a diplomatic solution, always. And you know, a negotiated agreement. That's always our preference. But to answer your question, if there's a threat to the national security of the United States, the president not just has the right, he has the obligation to address that national security.